Hi, folks. Welcome to Crisco's Corner. Hi, folks. Welcome back. And those that are new, welcome. This is a hearing yesterday in the Senate chambers concerning attempts by Democrats in both the House and Senate to impose ethics code on the Supreme Court. Oh, they're getting free trips, and they got all this other stuff, and they got this, and they got that, and Justice Thomas, he's right in the middle of it, and he's blah, blah, blah. Well, they all get free stuff, as you're going to see. And it's right out in the open. It's not like a Supreme Court justice travels somewhere to give a speech and nobody knows about it. Isn't like money giving from a certain communist country to a certain family that run the executive branch of this country. But that's another argument for another time. The Democrats are trying to ruin the reputation of Clarence Thomas. Period. One of the staunch members, I think, of the Supreme Court. The guy's a constitutionalist, always has been. And you remember the hell he went through trying to get confirmed. There was that slander about his attempts at a relationship with an intern or whatever it was. I forget her name. And guess who was the head of the Judiciary Committee at the time, running the, as Justice Thomas called it, a lynching on public television. A high-tech lynching was his term, I believe. And guess who was chairman? Joseph Biden. Isn't that interesting, when he was a senator? So here we are. Ethics rules for Supreme Court justices. I'm going to show you a clip right now of Chuck Schumer, at the time was the head Democrat in the Senate, and Maxine Waters, two brain cells, Maxine Waters, threatening cabinet members, the people to go out and threaten them, and Chuck Schumer directly threatened Supreme Court justice members. Let's watch these quick clips.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
Well, what'd you think of that? Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Let's listen what Senator Lindsey Graham has to say. I'm not a big fan of his, but, you know, when he's right, he's right.
I, too, have expressed a desire for the court to be more transparent, to have rules that the public can relate to. I think we've been talking about that for quite a while. I have never suggested that the Congress should take over the court's ability to regulate itself. I do not believe that is wise. And the letter that was received by the committee was not just signed by Justice Roberts, it was signed by all of the judges. All of them have the same concern, not just one. So where do we go and what are we trying to do? I think here's what you're trying to do on the Democratic side. Remember when Senator Schumer went to the court and started yelling at everybody in the court? Not everybody, just pretty much our folks. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh.
Now look at that before he goes into it, and that's what you just saw the video. Him in front of the Supreme Court saying these things. Look at Maxine Waters. You ain't seen nothing yet. The hell of the Supreme Court, we will defy them. These people know they are in very high-profile positions. They have security. And there's another Democrat from New Hampshire, of all places. That's a threat directly. Schumer is a threat directly. Why weren't these people put in jail? At least minimum. Interviewed by the FBI and or the Secret Service. Because who runs the Justice Department? Someone that was nominated for the Supreme Court, and he thinks he got screwed out of it. Merrick Garland. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that ironic? Every single person that was protesting in front of the Supreme Court justices' homes was in violation of multiple federal laws. Felonies. Yet, here's what happened. Nothing. Do you think for a minute that if Republicans or conservative people or, God forbid, Trump supporters protested in front of Sotomayor or Kagan on the Supreme Court, two high-profile Democrats, they wouldn't have been held to pay? They wouldn't have been cuffed. They would have been cuffed, thrown in jail for 2 years with no trial, and God knows what else. The only person that got arrested was the nutbar that came to assassinate, or so he says, Justice Kavanaugh, that changed his mind at the last minute and turned himself in. That's it. And then the Attorney General turns around and says, well, that was because it's up to local law enforcement there and the people on the ground. It's federal law. You're the Attorney General of the United States, the highest ranking law enforcement officer in the country. It's your decision. Let's listen on before I lose my temper.
You have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions. Awful decisions, we all have been in the boat of getting an outcome in the Supreme Court we didn't like. But the majority leader of the United States Senate went before the court, literally out in front of it, and threatened two judges. And Maxine Waters says, you ain't seen nothing yet. So we can talk about ethics, and that's great, but we're also going to talk about today of a concentrated effort by the left to delegitimize this court and to cherry-pick examples to make a point. The New York Times wrote an article a couple of days ago suggesting that George Mason Law School was up to an effort to take over the court by lavishing them with trips and influencing their decision-making process by sponsoring trips overseas while they were on break. The New York Times did not tell us about Justice Sotomayor's travel to Florence, Italy. They did not tell us about efforts. Justice Kennedy took a 3-week multi-trip to Salzburg, Austria, San Francisco, Aspen, Colorado, paid for by the Aston Institute and the University of the Pacific. Justice Sotomayor and Justice Ginsburg traveled to Florence, Italy on the dime of the New York University. Justice Jackson was reimbursed by the University of California, Berkeley.
And those who don't know, Justice Jackson is the newest member of the Supreme Court.
In 2016 and 2014 for traveling to the Aspen Institute. Chief Justice Roberts was reimbursed for travel to London to teach a class on the history of the Supreme Court to students of the New England School of Law. So universities throughout this country have been paying for trips of judges. But if you read the New York Times, you wouldn't know that, would you?
What he's trying to say is that it's universal around. Now, we can debate whether that's ethical or not, but they all do it. And it's been that way for many, many years. That's why Supreme Court justices are appointed for life. For life. It's not like they have to run for re-election. It's different. And it was set up that way purposely and brilliantly, I might add. They're trying to say it's just a republic. It's just the conservative justices. And no, you know what? If you are against that kind of thing, you're against it for everybody. Let's listen on. Look at that.
Can't say I read the New Republic, but this is a headline.
Look at that.
The Democrats need to destroy Clarence Thomas's reputation. That's sort of what we're here about. Well, it's not going to work. This assault on Justice Thomas is well beyond ethics. It is about trying to delegitimize a conservative court that was appointed through the traditional process. Your response has been to pack the court. Virtually every member of the Democratic caucus, except maybe one or two, are for expanding the number of judges to dilute the conservative majority that exists today.
That was tried by FDR, and it stalled and didn't work. And I believe another president tried it. Both Democrats, by the way. And that's the problem. It's not listed. That's one of the mistakes that the founders made. They should list the number of Supreme Court justices at 9, what it always has been. I've always called it, I wish they would do it, not a federal law to do that, because they could always turn around and change the law later. A constitutional amendment that seals for all time 9 members. Look at Venezuela, which, by the way, has a constitution that almost mirrors ours. Yeah, go figure. They had 9 justices, I believe. And then when the dictators took over, they expanded the court. Now they're like 30-something justices. That's what they want to do. The Supreme Court is a conservative court, and they hate it. And especially after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which, rest her soul, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said was a bad ruling. And she's the ultra-progressive at the time, when she was alive, on the court. And these Democrats are so twisted that when she died, they pitched a fit because she couldn't hang on for 4 more months until the election so a Democrat could appoint a judge in her place. They chastised her for dying. That's how sick these people are. Let's continue.
So, Mr. Chairman, from our point of view, this is not going to work. You can write all the articles you want to write. You can take all the shots at the conservative justices you want to take. You can picket before their houses, and it's not going to stop people from doing their job. This is an unseemly effort by the Democratic left to destroy the legitimacy of the Roberts Court. It's put people at risk. It's put their personal safety at risk. And if you want to talk about making the court a better institution, I'll be glad to work with you in that regard. If you want to talk about destroying the court, count me out.
Now, there's a little bit more to this, but you got the gist of it. Just for giggles, let's watch those 2 short clips one more time.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
Isn't that interesting? And there you have it. None of this is taken out of context. It's directly the way it was said. They're doing everything possible to destroy the fabric of the foundation of our government, the state, and especially the federal level. You have AOC, that Mensa member, I say that in jest, talking about, hey, if you don't like a ruling from a Supreme Court or a judge, just ignore it. Just ignore it. Can you imagine if President Trump had said that? When all these things were filed and lawsuits were filed with federal judges about building the wall and many other things in immigration policy, and put on hold basically for his first 2 years. And then when they lost control of the House, everything fell apart. But the Republicans had everything the first 2 years of Trump's presidency. And they had federal judges at every step of the way to stop conservatives from changing the rules, changing the policies. Did you hear President Trump say, just ignore them. Just ignore them. There would have been hell to pay. Hell to pay. I am so tired of these hypocrites. And this isn't about they think much differently than me and we're opposite sides of most issues, if not all. It's how they say and do things. They're radicals, absolute radicals. And until the conservatives in Washington and at the state level and even the local level start to fight back, use the same rules against them, use their tactics against them, this is a slowly losing battle. I'm not a big fan of Lindsey Graham, but he's right on this one. So they just slander. You notice the letter he talked about at the beginning, basically chastising all this, was signed by all 9 justices. When was the last time you got a 9-0 decision? It's ridiculous. It's disgusting and it's despicable. And why Aren't they screaming racism? Clarence Thomas is black. Oh, it doesn't count now. Isn't that interesting? I'm so sick of these Democrat progressives, I could scream. Before I get too mad and say things that I'll probably regret, I'll just leave it at that. Until next time, goodbye and good luck.